Well, in the previous tutorial, we started adding some functionality to our inventory screen here. You could do things like just highlight it, and it would, when you moved the mouse cursor over, it would change the opacity of that item to indicate to the user that you're interacting with that particular item in some way. But when you click on the item, it doesn't do anything. So we're going to work today on this idea of selecting and deselecting items. So let's go to our objects actually, and we want to add a new animation to our object here. So all I did was I opened up this object in Paint 3D. You could do the same thing with Pascal, I think, if you want. And I just added a yellow border around this and hit the plus sign here and added that new animation right there. I'll get rid of this one here. I did that for the sword, and I did that for the potion as well. Added this animation. Okay? Now let's bring up our inventory manager, and let's take a look at this code here. So we want to make it so that when the user clicks on an item, it changes a deselected item to a selected item. We could start building off of this code right here, and many programmers might. I, however, am going to keep this the way it is because it's nice and clean, and I'm going to create a new group. I'm going to move this down and over here. Remember, this has to stay the parent one. We don't want this code to be running all the time. And I'm going to call this one selecting, deselecting, items. And I'm going to actually copy this code here. I'm going to paste it in here. Let me move this down. We don't need this anymore. I'm going to get rid of that. It's not about that. So when the cursor is on an item, right? And when that object has an animation, the current animation of 0, right? Let's go to our grouping of items here. When that item has an animation of 0, meaning that it's deselected, and when we click the mouse button, right? So mouse button released, and that's the left button, right? We want to change that item's animation to 1, to the next animation. All right, let's see how we did. Let's just run a preview and see if it changes the animation. Let's hit the I key, bring up our inventory. Look at that. All right, now we want to make it so that when you click on one of these items when it's selected, it'll deselect it again. So let's look at this. What happens if we just copy this code, paste it in, and say when the number is 1, change it to 0, right? That makes sense, right? So when the animation is 0, and you've left-clicked the button and it's on the item, change it to 1. When it's 1, change it to 0. Makes sense, right? Let's try to run that. Okay, I'm clicking on the items, and now they're not getting selected at all. Let's take a look at our code. What's going on here? So this is one of those situations where it makes human logical sense, right? But it doesn't make sense to the software, right? The computer is intelligently stupid. What's happening is, and this is where you kind of need to know how your coding software is running. is it reads this entire bit of code, right? I think each frame, it reads the whole code. So let's look at this, right? It says the layer is visible. It reads this. Is it on an item? Change the opacity. Yep. Is it not on an item? Do that. Then it comes here and it says, is it on an item? Yes. Is that animation 0? Yes. Was the button released? Yes. So the animation is now 1. And this is where we would think it would stop, right? But remember, it keeps going. So it says, is this true? Yes. Is this now true? Is the animation now 1? Yes. Was the button released? Yes. So change it to 0. So it never actually gets out of having the animation be 0, right? Or deselected. It never gets out of that. We need to break out of this sort of loop that's going on here. So one way you can break out of your sort of logical loops here is by using a variable. Now again, I'll beat this into the ground, but you want to think about scope with your variables, right? And scope, of course, is just how far the variable is seen. Does this need to be a global variable that's seen throughout the entire program? No, not really. So let's keep it local, and let's add a object variable, actually. So common actions for all object, variable, modify a variable of an object. Let's use the inventory container. And I'm going to call this variable reset. And I'm going to set it to 0. Now every time that this code is read in a new frame, it's going to set this or create this variable called reset and set it to 0. All right, so what do we do with this? We're going to come over here and we're going to add another condition that says common conditions for all object, variables, value of an object's variable. The object is the inventory container. The variable is reset. And we're going to say, well, this equals 0, right? Well, we set it to here. Do this, right? And then let's copy this, paste it here, and let's set the variable to 1. So now reset is set to 1. So when it comes down here, it goes, that's true, that's true, that's true. Let's copy this, paste it in. That's not true, right? Because we changed it to 1 here. This is not true. Don't run this code. But we do want it to run this code when it's set to, when the animation is needs to be selected again. So we're going to copy this and paste it here so that it's 1. Let's see what happens, right? Let's see how we did here. All right, here we go. All right, we selected again at least. And now we can deselect. So what we learned today was more really about, again, using computer versus human logic here, and knowing how to get out of sort of a logical loop in GDevelop, which we're going to be doing a lot of that. Okay, so think about this, practice it a little bit, right, and we'll come back to this again at some point.